And the next presentation, I would like to introduce our head of product marketing. He's also one of our co-founders of Configit, Henrik Hulgaard. Henrik, it's an honor to have you here in the studio with me today, and really looking forward for the presentation that you're going to do. And it has a very, very long title, and I simply cannot remember it, so I have to read it up. How efficient management of product configuration data enables B2B manufacturers to navigate changing market dynamics. Really looking forward to what that means.
Thank you so much, Shahid. Maybe I should just point out, I'm head of product management, not product marketing. Small detail, I think Anna-Dorte will appreciate that. Yes, so it's a very long title, and the key word in that very long title is changing market dynamics. Manufacturing companies today are faced with a number of challenges and ranging a fairly broad spectrum shown here on the slide. And all of these challenges require a digital transformation. It requires that there is a smooth and consistent view on the data across the enterprise. We just heard about silos and how important it is to break down the silos. And that's basically what I'm going to talk about today, is how introducing a CLM solution like our Configit ACE and use that to link between existing enterprise systems. Traditionally, it is the PLM system for products and engineering. It's the CRM systems that are used in the sales area, and it's the ERP systems that is being used in the manufacturing. And specifically, I want to go into 3 of the 5 areas that I just had on the previous slide. So I'm going to go into showing how a CLM solution can help you to be more sustainable, how a CLM solution can help you manage the challenges with supply chain and the challenges in that area. And I'm going to talk about how it can use to handle the changing regulatory requirements. So if we look at the sustainability area, and of course that's a big area that for a manufacturing company covers many different aspects, from getting more sustainable energy to starting to have better manufacturing, better use of the materials. And you might ask yourself, how can a configuration solution help to support a more sustainable manufacturing? And in order to articulate this, and I think what's important here is to understand that even with existing products and with existing processes, it is actually possible to dramatically improve the sustainability of a manufacturing company. So in order to explain this, let me try to go into how you measure sustainability. There is a standard way to do this. It's called the greenhouse gas protocol. It's basically a way to measure the impact on the environment. And it divides the impact into 3 different areas. So basically it is the upstream activities, so it's the sub-suppliers, the energy you consume. It's the actual resources that a manufacturing company has under control. And then it is the downstream activities. And if you look at this and say, where does configuration fit into this? There are a couple of places that are pretty obvious. One is that in the actual manufacturing of products, we can use a configuration solution to reduce the waste. And of course, less waste means that you consume less resources. You basically save the environment that way. We also have another area, which is in the downstream area. And this is where the consumption of the energy or other resources of the product after it has left the manufacturing. So this is a product that is being used. Think of, for example, a pump. It sits there and it works over many years. The energy that it consumes in that time period, that is also contributing to the downstream emissions of a manufacturing company. And I'll quickly touch upon how a configurator can address these 2 areas. So of course, when we talk about reducing waste, this waste is of course not intentionally. This comes about because typically there's a misalignment between what the engineering systems think can be produced and what the sales and ordering systems think can be sold. And introducing a single source of truth with respect to configuration is a key in eliminating this kind of discrepancy between the two systems. So basically and on this diagram I have sort of merged in also all these little systems that typically sit in a larger organization. They all need to be referring to the same consistent view on the possible options and choices you can offer in the market. And if you do this and introduce a CLM system, we have clear evidence that will, in many cases, completely eliminate the manufacturing errors that you see in the actual production. And we had a case story a couple of years ago in the CLM Summit from Jaguar Land Rover. Alex Crawford explained how introducing ACE at JLR completely eliminated their configuration errors on the manufacturing side. And it also had a number of other benefits for them. Now, the other area where a configuration solution can help, again, help on the existing products, the existing processes, that is to reduce the emission of the products being sold. And how do you do that? And yeah, so the emissions of the products being sold actually often outweighs by many factors the consumption of producing the product. This is a little bit, I mean, a typical example of this is electrical cars. An electrical car compared to a traditional car is actually consuming more resources to manufacture. But if you look at the lifetime of the car, it will vastly save the environment because the consumption of electricity instead of using gas. So how do you do this? Well, basically the approach is to help, first of all, customers to select the optimal product. So by matching the customer requirements with the technical capabilities of the product and thereby finding an optimal solution is a key in achieving this. It's also a way to help customers that are conscious of the environment, allow them to understand the effect of the choices that they make. So allow them to prioritize between price, performance, and how sustainable the product is. So some sustainable products that are using less energy, of course, can have a higher price. But many customers are willing to trade off those two parameters. Now, this is not so simple, and the guidance is pretty important because it's not clear for the user what the consequence is by selecting the different choices. And I have an example here on the right that is taking from it's a car configurator, and I have a little statement there at the bottom that came from a review of this is a BMW i4, and they pointed out that the choice of the wheel has a dramatic effect on the range. And it's actually from just an 18-inch wheel to a 20-inch wheel, you get 100 kilometer less range on your car. So that consequence has to be clear when you do these choices so that you can make the trade-off. It may be that you want the nice 20-inch wheels and are willing to accept the shorter range, but maybe you want to specify that you would like to have a sustainable product, and then there are certain options that are not available. The other thing that a configurator does is that it ensures that when you have configured the product based on your requirements, have found the right product with those requirements, and then you need to go and install the product. And there is typically a setup process in which this product needs to be configured, typically by software parameters that needs to be set. I've shown here on the right a pump from Grundfos, and it has 20 different settings. It's a very simple program. There's one parameter, but it has 20 values. Now, which one of these values should I choose? Well, that is determined by the requirements I have for this pump. And that's basically what I specified up front when I configured it. And I need to make sure that there is an alignment from that configuration all the way down to the software parameters that I need to set. And if I don't do this correctly, then this pump will not operate optimally. And it will basically use too much power over its lifetime. So how do you do this? Well, it's actually quite straightforward. It's not so easy maybe to get the information about the actual CO2 values. That is actually a typical challenge for many companies to find these values. But if you have them and have the understanding on how your choices affect your emission, then you can add a parameter in your configuration model. I illustrated that by a very traditional, simple sort of ABCD scale. You can imagine having that in your configurator. And then as a person who configures the product, I can go in and select where do I want to be on that scale. And then the configuration engine will basically restrict my choices to adhere to that level. That was quickly a little bit about how a configuration solution can help the manufacturing companies be more sustainable. My second area or example was about the supply chain. So this is a quite different area, of course, and we all know the challenges that manufacturing companies have had over the last couple of years about shortage of parts. We had Corona, suddenly there were certain chips we couldn't get our cars, it took years to get a car, and many other products were hurt by this. Now, the key point here is that if you have an integrated configuration solution in which both your engineering and your sales systems and your manufacturing systems are all aligned with a consistent view on the possible choices, this is fairly straightforward to handle. Now, here's an example. Imagine a tsunami destroys a factory that produces a particular paint color. Now, this is actually something that happened some years ago in Japan. There was an earthquake, there was a tsunami. It destroyed a lot of things, including this particular factory. And the company that produced these cars, it happens to be, had to get rid of this choice in the configurator. And you may say, that sounds pretty straightforward, right? But it turns out it's not. The reason it's not so simple is that typically sales configurators are distributed around a number of different markets. They have different systems for example, websites from the systems used to take orders at the dealers. And then again, they had separate systems in the engineering space from those in the sales systems. So you can imagine that if you had to address 100 and some markets, go through and change all the rules in all the different web configurators, also do it for the dealers, also in the engineering, that could be a big task. Now, if you have a CLM system like ACE, it's actually a fairly trivial operation because you have a single source of truth when it comes to the configuration options. So it's just a matter of adding a single rule and say, I do not want to offer this particular color. And by doing so, it will immediately be reflected across the different enterprise systems. So immediately it will be removed from the websites, and it will be removed from the ordering systems, and it will be removed from the engineering configurators. Now, this example might seem a little simple. You might know that many of the problems we had was very detailed parts. A single chip that sat way down in our bill of materials was not available. Now, what do you do about that? Well, it actually is not so different. You take the bill of material, I tried to illustrate that on the left here. You go through and find out what part it is that is not available. You create a rule based on the selection conditions on the BOM. You basically create the same rule, and you say that combination that leads down to that part is not available. Adding that rule to your configurator, you can test the consequence of that, and once you are happy with it, you can release it, and it will be updated throughout. So that was a little bit about changing in supply chain and how that can be handled. Last example I have is about regulatory compliance. Now, this is also an area that has a lot of changes, and we'll probably see a lot more regulatory rules being brought in over the next years, for example, to manage the sustainability of the products. Now, the challenge here is that regulatory rules are very much, as it almost says in the name, are very much tied to individual markets. So it's very much tied to one set of rules in one country, another set of rules in another country. So it's not tied to the product as such. And you have to have good tools to manage these rules to make sure that they are consistently applied. Now, a classical example when you talk about regulatory rules is that in the US there was a rule about, and this is some years old, but it's still the example that people use, but there was a rule that from a certain date, every car in the US must have a reverse camera. Now, such a rule is of course not just introduced from one day to the next. There is always a time frame in which the manufacturers have time to prepare for these new regulatory rules. And that means that you can already ahead of time add this rule to your rule system. And a key element of that is that you have to have a capability called effectivity, which allows you to specify that this particular rule doesn't apply today, but it applies at a certain date and onwards. If you have that capability, you can add the rule today, you can analyze the effect of the rule, understand the consequences. Maybe suddenly you do not have the correct offering in certain markets, and you can then adapt to that, and the rule is just going to sit there. It's going to stay in the system, and when this particular day where the rule applies comes up, the rule will be applied and all the configurators will be adapted to it. So we have actually companies that do only compliance rules in our ACE solution. An example of this is Nordic Swan Ecolabel. It's a company that certifies products according to how they live up to a set of requirements. It could be like a shampoo, and if it has not so many materials that are harmful, then you get to certify your shampoo that it lives up to their requirements, and you can put a stamp on the shampoo illustrating for your customers that this is for example, environmentally friendly product. Now, EcoSwan label, they use ACE to manage all these rules. And the challenge again is that you have to manage them across many different markets. There can be different rules in different markets, but also across, of course, many different product groups. You might have many, many different types of shampoos. They all have to adhere to the same set of rules in order to get the certification. Once you have created this rule set, you can drive, for example, a self-service portal and allow your customers to go in and check whether their product will live up to the requirements. So that was a little bit of a quick tour through how introducing a CLM system will help you to address some of the challenges that manufacturing companies face today. Basically, how you can use a configurator to guide a user to trade off price, performance, and sustainability, how you can use a configurator to react to quick changes in, for example, the supply chain, and how you can use it to manage the regulatory requirements that comes in. So with that, thank you so much, and let me hear if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Henrik, for your presentation, and also to explaining, what the difference is and how we can address some of the changes in sustainability and configuration, how they can put together. But you mentioned that, how we can work with the regulatory rules, etc. But why can't you use that? Why is configuration lifecycle management important? Why can't you just utilize the existing solutions like PLM or ERP to handle these kind of things?
Yeah, so as I illustrated on one of the first slides, most enterprise systems, both PLM, ERP, and CRM, they do have some capabilities when it comes to writing rules. They do have some type of variant management. But they are typically quite weak. And for example, the PLM space, they are very product oriented. So they are very much oriented to manage individual products, not so much handling rules that goes across markets. And in order to do that, you have to have a very clear sort of view on the individual markets. If you look at ERP, of course, they have all the supply chain under control. They know exactly what's available, what's on stock, what's not, all that. but they're normally not linked to your sales systems. So you don't have a good transparency between your website and then what you actually can manufacture. So I think we have demonstrated a number of times that introducing a CLM system to consolidate this in one place is actually a key to achieve these things.
You also mentioned different kind of configuration, and one of them is, which we discuss a lot, is how can we configure software parameters within a configured product. So does Configit have any customers who actually do this?
We do actually, and we have some of our oldest customers are exactly doing this. Our very first customer in Configit was Danfoss, and that was what they used a configurator for, to help set up the parameters for cooling controllers in supermarkets. And Vestas, which is also one of our very first customers, are using our configuration solution to configure wind turbines. There are thousands of parameters in a wind turbine that needs to be set correctly for it to, again, perform optimally. And they use our configuration engine to help ensure that those parameters are set correctly. I think we'll see a lot more of this. We have clearly any type of product these days have a software component to it, almost any kind of product. And this software component is helping provide the capabilities of the product. And so there is a linkage from how it was configured to how you need to set this software up in the deployment of the product. So I think, and that's something that we clearly can see a configurator can help you with.
Thanks a lot, Henrik, for your presentation and enlightening us on the different areas, sustainability, green configuration, and configuration lifecycle management. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.